Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Davy Sutton, and welcome to TravelScope Travel Tuesday. I'm joined with Lori McBrown. How are you? It's Lori. It's International Women's Day today.
No! Well, then this
Yes,
is great. There's two women about to talk about international stuff. So woohoo!
right. It just popped. The light bulb popped on. We don't have much to speak directly to that, but we can always shout out for being a woman who likes to be international. Blah, blah,
That's
blah.
right. That's right.
So we have. How was your week last week?
It's a good question. It's one of those weeks. Do you ever have one of those weeks where you're like, I'd do good to answer how was yesterday. I'm assuming it was good.
You're still here and you have flowers on your hat, so I think it's good.
There you go. There you go.
So we have kind of a deep and intriguing subject to unpack today. So I hope that it will be a really good discussion. Everybody watching online, or if you're in our chat room, feel free to join in. We are just kind of doing this for understanding and discussion and things that come up while you travel. A lot of times we don't go to places because of what we see in the media, and then sometimes we go to places with these perceptions because we see things in the media and our minds are blown. And that's what happened to me last week when I actually just returned from Israel yesterday. And Lori, believe it or not, sometimes just by saying Israel, it's controversial.
I didn't realize that till we were talking, and you were talking about putting out a picture, and people were going, "Where are you?" And you're like, "I'm in Israel." And the controversy you got, which kind of explain that to. I mean, I know we had the conversation, but explain what the controversy is.
So the controversy, it actually, and we're going to go into this more methodically so everybody can understand, but there are Palestinians in the land that is now called Israel who on Israel's Independence Day, I'm going to get to I had the name of it. Basically, yeah, Israel's Independence Day in that land, call it, which is equal to disaster. So one person's point of view is independence, and one people's point of view is that it's a disaster. So we're going to kind of unfold some of these things that I learned while going to Israel, courtesy of Puzzle Israel. And I went on a trip hosted by Puzzle Israel. It's a cool tour company. I think you would appreciate this kind of tour company too, Lori, because it's locals who are hosting you, and they share kind of like a personalized experience, but also kind of try to balance everything. So it's like a local taking you on the tour instead of like a big brand tour company that kind of plugs in plays.
Well, I would think, especially with a trip like this, that would be so very important, and more important even than, maybe just some domestic travel type of thing, to really understand what you're doing and the implications. And it sounds like, and especially with the discussion we're going to have today, you learned a lot from it.
Right. And again, if you want more information at the end of this, I will post the replay and details and links to Puzzle Israel and other information that comes up here on my website, daily-affair.com. I just want to give a kind of a disclaimer, because this is a controversial subject. We are here just to kind of have a sophisticated discussion, acknowledge our ignorances, and also kind of take everybody in. So if we have our rules to engagement. You are welcome to join this discussion. We know it's a hot topic. And we are here for the discussion, understanding, not attacks and not politics. So if you'd like to join our conversation in our chat room or even on the web with us, we welcome you. This is what you'd have to do. Say your name, where you're from, and then give your comment or question within 10 seconds. We do reserve the right to eject you from our comment section, chat, or webcast at our discretion. But before I dive into this too, because I want to get through it as all as possible. I want to make sure you're going to balance me, Lori, to make sure that it all makes sense, right? But my background is that I actually hold a degree in world religions. So I studied religions, and now I'm a journalist who covers travel, adventure, culture and race all blended together. So when I had the opportunity to take this trip, it was like perfect, right up my alley, because I went rappelling down a canyon, but I also sat in homes of some of the natives and local people. So
Okay, so we have lost Davy there for a minute, so we'll get her back in here. But
I want
we're
to.
talking about being able to balance the conversation, and Davy's background is one that is definitely more educated in the area. So I will add the balance of that is not my arena, but I'm someone who definitely believes that travel gives us perspectives that we didn't have. And hopefully I will add the perspective and be able to ask those basic questions that maybe lay Americans don't totally get. And I think this is definitely a year for us to discuss that, to figure out why does this matter to us. The one thing I love about Blab is that we get to talk to people all over the world. So it'll be great getting some of those perspectives from all over. And there's Davey!
It was weird. I just got kicked out of my internet. I don't know what has happened. See how hot topic this is?
It's a conspiracy. They're trying to stop us down.
Right. They're trying to prevent us from our understanding. But anyways, the American point of view is very pro-Israel. And I was saying that it's not really well-rounded, because all we basically hear is that we must support Israel. The United States needs to support Israel. It's more, somebody actually, when I was over there, told me it's, people tend to think of Israel as a cause, a situation to kind of resolve, instead of a country with issues, as other countries have. Many countries, there's countries and they have their issues within it. And I want to start with addressing America's issues. The foundation of our country is based on pushing a class of people as laborers, and then quickly identifying those laborers on race. So at one point, like, it didn't become like, early on, religion was used as an identifier of one class to another. Like the Bible commands us to kind of take care of these slaves or whatever. But in sharing that gospel, I use the quoting words, with the slaves, they soon adopted parts of God saving the slaves, Moses, and Promised Land themselves. So that soon neutralized the religious stronghold over the division between the races and class. It was, so now it's basically that was an early way to kind of divide the races and the classes in our country. But then it quickly became based on color, as an identifier of where you belong in our class system. So today, with the American terrorist group, the KKK, they may still hold God as a way to back their beliefs, but it's not a driving force or as compelling as the hate is. So that's the foundation of the understanding. This foundation of understanding kind of where some of the divisive issues that when it comes to our country will help us in moving forward. And it starts in Israel in 1947 by a man named Ben Gurion. And if you ever fly into Tel Aviv, that's the name of the airport.
That's the airport.
Yes, that's the airport. And he would later be known as the first prime minister, also kind of the guy who people say established Israel. So Israel has only been around since 1948. He's also led the Zionist movement, and the Zionist movement, to simplify that, means that the Jewish people from around the world, because God gave them the promised land, can return to the promised land. That's essentially what the Zionists kind of, the people that are believing that. And now, today, those would be more conservative, or what you would think Orthodox Jews. So the Orthodox Jews are the ones that you really see, like you might see the women in kind of, I call it, no offense, but I call them maybe like the women in the dopey haircut. It's just like a blunt haircut, and you're like, is that their real hair? No, it's not. It's a wig, and you see them kind of wearing that. And the men are more identifiable. They have and then the lips are on those guys, but yet a real deep Jewish community, and those are the Orthodox Jews, and they are considered conservative or right wing when it comes to political stances. But political stances, even though Israel is a country where there is supposed to be separation of church and state, it is not so evident as it is here. It's not that the line isn't so clear. So there was, of course, already Arabs known at that time living in the area called Palestine. Now, according to official UN, the United Nations, there wasn't an establishment of a nation there, wasn't official, but the area was known as Palestine, and Palestinian Arabs lived there. So people were living there. So there was a civil war between 1947 and 1948. Again, not so long ago, right. Within people's, people are still alive to live this, where because of the Zionist movement, hundreds of thousands of Jewish people kind of invaded or occupied the land. They came home to reclaim the homeland that God promised them in the Bible. And of course, many of those were Eastern European and European Jews, white Jews. And so now we have these white Jewish people amongst these Arab who might be brown. So now you can start seeing when I established earlier about American kind of identifying people.
I was wondering where you were going with that.
Identify people with color. Now, of course, these people come, both Arabs and Jewish people come in all colors. But like from Eastern Europe, loads of them came to occupy the land. And so now we have two peoples, Jews and Arabs. Jews from everywhere, like I said, and then that's where the color thing. But then now we have the other layer of religion, where the passion comes, where there isn't anything to argue about humanity involved or not, because the Arabs are mostly Muslim, and there is a little asterisk to put to that because Arabs, there are Christian Arabs and Jewish Arabs and all kinds of sects of Christian Arabs and also Muslim Arabs. But as a whole, you can assume most of the Arabs were Muslim that were living in the land. And then, of course, the Israelis that occupied the land, the now known as Israelis, were Jewish people. So now we have the color and now we have the religion. So there were attempts early on to establish a dual Palestinian and Israeli state, two states.
And that was always the prevailing. I mean, even in America, our policy in how to handle them was recognizing dual states as a way of peace.
Right, and they kind of created these crazy borderlines. But the long story short is that it failed, and what the UN recognizes today is Israel, not Palestine. But there are Palestinians still living in the land. And what has happened, so this is when I was telling you off the air, but I will share with you, this is when I learned how divisive just saying Israel can be. When I was there, I was rappelling off of the Maktesh Ramon, which we kind of say Ramon crater, but that's a whole different story, the phenomenon of how that area is created. So beautiful, but it's only there in Israel, and they have 5 or 6 of them. Oh. And I was live chatting, and people were asking, where are you? And I said, oh, I'm in Israel. And they said, no, you mean Palestine. Israel doesn't exist. Several of those comments. And that's when I was understanding. Now, some of my friends who were on that trip with me I have a more US based audience. So it was limited to that. But some of my friends who have a more global audience, they were getting a lot of backlash because of just being there, just being in Israel. They even had people who have contributed to their website want their content removed from the website.
For just visiting there?
Just visiting there and not making a stance on anything political, but just going there as a tourist.
Wow, I had no idea that was inflamed. Let me ask you this. During your visit, and the group you went with, and you were explaining how Puzzle Israel, you got to kind of go with the locals and stuff. When you say the locals, were with Israeli locals or those that would say they were Palestinian locals, or both?
Yeah, so everyone actually.
Okay.
It was a beautiful mix. So mostly Israeli, but they gave us opportunity to visit 2 Arab homes, one in a Palestinian community, which I have a little note down here. I can actually tell that story now. Went into a Palestinian neighborhood. And I'll explain more about the neighborhoods and the segregation that has happened as well. But then we visited an Arab woman who considered herself Palestinian Israeli. She had 4 of them, Christian and something, but she was everything, and she lived in Tel Aviv, and she looked like you can drop her in the middle of Manhattan. She would take over and kill it in the US. She was absolutely gorgeous and dressed modern, didn't cover up, and wasn't conservative at all. And that's kind of how the range of people that we had the opportunity to meet. And then I met a sect of Muslim or Arab people called the Druze, and got to eat their food. And then again, I told you, went into a Palestinian Muslim neighborhood where it's very clear if you're in a Arab van or if you're in a Jewish van. Sometimes it's just because of the writing on the van, because one is Arabic and one is sometimes it's the way that you carry on the feature of the car. And so even in the neighborhood, rocks were thrown at our car because they knew that Jewish people were there, even though we were invited to the neighborhood. But that doesn't mean the entire neighborhood invited us, if you get my drift.
Right.
So
let me ask you, so I'm going to interject one thing here that I had learned when I was reading, but the fact that some of these places you actually got to go in and go sit down and have a meal with them, did they discuss the importance of eating together and yes. So share that, because that's a whole other layer of the story there of actually sitting down and eating and what that means in the culture.
Well, definitely, it's a Muslim, I guess, practice that they will not refuse anybody who comes to their house to eat. So it can even be your enemy. You can walk into they will invite you to their home to eat. And we were warned ahead of time, because a lot of times Americans, if somebody gives you something in their home and you refuse them, that is actually a way of disrespect for them. Right. So we were warned, they're going to feed you, you must eat. We're not going to have any issues here. They went out and they take great pride to prepare the meals ahead of time when they know guests are coming. So that was one thing that was clear. When we went to, I think I went to 3 different Arab homes. Even the woman who was Arab, Palestinian, Christian, that was a big deal for her as well. And then the other thing that you notice in Arab neighborhoods or Muslim neighborhoods and Arab neighborhoods is that the way that they live and they house, the entire family lives together, generations and generations. So when the patriarch builds the home, and then he has 5 sons, he will build the home on top of each other. And each house, it's like he'll build like a condominium building. So each family, the boys will stay there and build their families on the top of each other. And what you might see that aesthetically looks different than other neighborhoods, even if you came here, you might think on its face from the wide picture that it looks like a poorer neighborhood, because there's always construction. And it's just, there's always, let's say a man, he is 35 and he has 3 sons and they're all under the age of 5 or something like that. He has 10 to 15 years to build a home. So there's things that are always in construction and they still live in their homes. And so that aesthetic, just compared to some of the Jewish neighborhoods, you see even that, and that they have these little culture hubs within each neighborhood. So that kind of those tensions and the segregation, there's Palestinian neighborhoods and there's Jewish neighborhoods. When you look upon a city, and it will explain, sometimes we hear, and I heard this before going there, the 4 quarters of Jerusalem, and that gives me a better understanding why there is. And somebody told me about a taxi ride when I was there, that they asked somebody. They had an Arab taxi driver, and he said to take him to downtown in Jerusalem, and he was thinking he was going to be dropped off at the Jewish downtown, but he went to the Palestinian downtown, and then they have the I think I forgot the other four quarters, but there's like a Armenian quarter, and they have, it's just really segregated. So you look upon a city, if we look upon our North American cities, we don't divide neighborhoods the way that neighborhoods are divided. If you see a cluster of homes, it's going to be a Jewish neighborhood, a mixed neighborhood, or a Palestinian neighborhood, and they actually on maps have zones for them, A, B, and C. So A would be Jewish neighborhood, B would be a mixed community, and C would be a strictly Palestinian neighborhood, which some Palestinian neighborhoods are closed off, and that would be like the West Bank area.
Wow.
So
I'm going to take just a minute since we have some people joining us, but I just want to let everybody know, Davy just got back from a trip to Israel, so we're talking about that today and just what she learned. Again, this is another way that travel can kind of open up your mind to things that you didn't realize, because Davy's sharing some of the things that she learned and that she didn't know as an American going into this. And we do want this to be an engaging thing. So if you do have questions or comments on this, we want to hear from you. Feel free to jump in a seat, but we do have some rules for engagement on this one. This is completely just for discussion on understanding, no attacks or politics on this. So please do look up in the chat room. We have rules for engagement on this. State your name, where you're from, and your comment within 10 seconds or your question. Davy, head us into some more of this.
Okay, and so now you can kind of understand that that's the kind of simplest form I can do in our short time of the tension that might be within inside the borders. So now I'm going to move on to the Gaza Strip, which was something that we just would hear in the headlines.
I was going to say, I hear it all the time on the news. Yeah.
But to be fair, I had little understanding of it. And so I'm going to go through it. What is it? It's an occupied territory on the eastern border of Israel. The other borders of Gaza Strip is Egypt, which is completely closed. They completely closed that border as well. And then, of course, the Mediterranean Sea. The discourse is similar to what is going on here in America when people think of the rise of Donald Trump in American politics. Playing to the lowest common grievance of a people and offering to be the savior. Now, on its face, we talked about it before of it doesn't seem like he's saying anything of substance, right? But he clearly is resonating with people. So the Palestinian leadership was elected to do the same kind of thing for people. They put this leadership in place. Then shortly after, a terrorist group that kind of funded that leadership, they also were high up in the ranks of that kind of, there was a coup that happened. They took over the government. And the group is called Hamas. So you might hear that, Hamas. What is Hamas? Is it a person? It's actually a terrorist group. It's a small terrorist group, but they actually occupied the Gaza Strip to the point where Israel had to close its borders. Egypt closed its borders. Nobody can go in and out. Now, of course, what happens? There's civilians there. There's Palestinians there who are actually suffering as a people. Now, what sparked your interest in this? I really do want to answer your question, so we'll get to that when there is an appropriate break. So thank you, Amin. So the Palestinians that are there, what I think isn't translated is that, or a little known fact, that the Israeli government, though they've shut their borders to their occupied territory, so it's within its area that was originally granted to be Israel, but is kind of under siege, and to the point where they had to put up a border wall. They would send supplies, and they still send supplies and food to Gaza, even though it's kind of a hostile territory. They send supplies in. And Hamas actually takes those supplies and uses them for evil, to make bombs, and actually withhold some of the food from the Palestinians. Yeah, the people are there. And since they are a terrorist group, that means that they have little boundaries to what is civil and human. So they already do shields. So they're very is state of the art, one of the best in the world. They spend a lot of money to make sure that they can protect themselves. And as we're establishing with this conversation, it's probably because they have many enemies. So if bombs and threats go over the wall, they have devices that can track it, shoot it out of the air. So what they have been known to do is shoot the bombs out of schools over there in the Gaza Strip. And so in retaliation, the automatic missile from the Israeli side will bomb the school. And the headline is that Israel bombed a school in the Gaza Strip. Just to balance some of the conversation, just to let you know, that's kind of from the Israeli point of view, is kind of they feel like their hand is tied. Another situation that they did was the Hamas, they can't go over the wall. They can't flee through the sea and the borders are closed. They started digging tunnels. So I think it was in 2013 or 2014, they had these tunnels come through Israel, really sophisticated tunnels. They've been digging for a couple of years, and had some of the terrorists pop out in neighborhoods and kind of kill civilians right on the other side of the border. And it was also a high price was paid on heads of Israelis. So if they would also kidnap some Israelis and take them on the other side and to no man's land, because they know the Israeli government will do almost anything to get their people back. So that was kind of their strategic thing.
I think it's so interesting what you brought up about both how they're tunneling and how they're shooting from the schools, and then what the headlines read, because several of the articles, if you look up about, why Americans should care about the conflict over there and stuff. And it's one of those that they're saying that Western media is actually being duped by Hamas, in the coverage type, because of their tactics and how they do things.
Right. And what I actually also, in the range of people I got to speak to, was an Israeli soldier. The balance, because I'm a journalist, is that I did not get to speak to any Palestinian that were in distress. I spoke to Palestinians who were Israelis, but none that were in distress. Okay. So the thing that they do know is that they're still building tunnels. They closed off the ones that they found, but they don't know where they are building, and they know it's a matter of time. So they're just prepared. They're kind of in waiting. They know that's what's going on with the Gaza Strip. So to move on, the other hostile area within their borders is the West Bank, and it's Palestinian neighborhoods. And what they have done was plant Jewish neighborhoods in those communities to kind of dissolve tensions, so that the festering of kind of a disenfranchised people doesn't blow up again to another terrorist group. The unfortunate thing as to what has happened is that some of those right-wing conservative Jews that I told you about earlier are the ones being planted instead of what is called left-wing Jewish people, who might be more liberal and open to communication. So those right-wing are people over land. Planting them in those neighborhoods is going to cause more tension.
Instead of trying to find more moderate on both sides to be able to congeal together better. Right.
And from what I understand, that comes from from politics as well. Netanyahu, the leader, the prime minister now, he every neighborhood that is created has to be approved, and he's approving those right-wing ones. So now there is tension on the eastern border and the West Bank in those Palestinian neighborhoods. So now I wanted to lay that foundation. Now you learned of some of the internal conflict within Israel. Now we go to the Syrian border, which is in the Golan Heights area. And to explain that would be the northern part, where like the hills and the mountains are. And Israel and Syria, the border is highly, highly monitored. I'm talking, they make it clear, Israel makes it clear, none of your ish is coming over to this other side. The threat of something was shot out the air. They have drones monitoring the border. There is a UN base right there on the border, which I saw. I actually went up to the I was going to say,
were you able to see a lot of this stuff actually?
Yes.
Okay.
So it was quite invigorating, and actually the journalist in me was really thrilled. So we went to one of the hills where there was kind of Israeli bunkers. The area of Golan Heights, just to establish, used to be Syria. I forgot the exact year, but it was overtaken of Israel, and now the border is moved further. There is an abandoned city called Quneitra on the other side of the Syrian border. It's abandoned, but an Al Qaeda hub has grown and festered there. So the guide who took
All right, can anybody else hear I think Davey timed out on us there. Crystal was saying that Netanyahu turned down a meeting from the White House.
took me there said,
and that has been reported recently. From what I remember reading, Vice President ended up going over to visit Israel and the Palestinian Authority, and that it was kind of a diplomatic, they called it and I love this word, diplomatic kerfuffle over the cancellation of a trip to Washington that seemed to take the White House by surprise. Thanks, Crystal. This is Crystal said, great blab, by the way, always interested in this topic. This is something that we do love to do. Again, we don't do the fluffy travel shows. Travel opens up so many things. So, and Davey's back, so now we can kind of get back to more of her trip.
I apologies again. I know we're getting to a good part. So Syria's been in the headlines. And I was telling you something that was surreal. I was before I got right up to the border wall. About every 5 minutes, you can hear bombs or explosions right over there, and I can see the city of the abandoned town of Quneitra, and that was supposed to be a ceasefire. To summarize what's going on in Syria, just for understanding, because we hear it every day in our headlines across the world, and
absolutely, and that's been something actually as Americans, we've done so much over. Let them in, don't let them in. I mean, that's huge in our headlines.
Well, it's basically, I'm going to give you the kind of simplest answer is that it's a battle between who is right and who is wrong between Sunni and Shiite Muslims. It's a Muslim religious war. So we hear of names like the Taliban and Al Qaeda. Those are probably the most popular ones. They have the best marketing agencies. But
it's all about PR.
There's a list of these little subsets of who's right and wrong between the Sunni and Shiite Muslims. It's a religious war. And the Israelis say, for once, it's not us involved, right? But every once in a while, they're not mad at Israelis per se. But every once in a while, things try to come over the wall. And Israel is, that's why they're so strict on that border. No exceptions. An accidental drone, an accidental something shot out the air, unmanned cars, eyes in the sky, because they can't afford to have your fight come over to their borders.
They've got enough fight of their own as it is.
Right. So to kind of conclude, who are Israel's enemies? One of their biggest, I guess, national enemy is Hezbollah, which is a Shiite Islamic militant group and political party based in Lebanon, which is a few doors down, few countries down. And Lebanon, and I asked how many Hezbollah are there. Those are the ones who kind of would be kind of the biggest threat externally for them, not their neighbor Syria. Syria is just like if your gang war is tumbling over and then they tumble into your yard, you're like, hey, keep that fighting over there. And I kind of likened it to like a gang war, but with many, many, many civilian injuries as well, along the way, because when you get to the terrorist factor, that's when they will, use human shields or trick you with a child that wants to be a refugee or a woman, and then they put them on suicide mission, which probably they did not want to do. So we have Hezbollah, Al Qaeda, who they say are about 40,000 Al Qaeda. And then ISIS is unknown because ISIS is against everyone. That's what was made clear. So
they're non-discriminatory. They're just after everyone.
It's beyond the internal religious part. It's that everybody is wrong and we are right. So that's why they are kind of dangerous, because they're unknown and their tactics are unknown. They're more guerrilla style. Remember back in the day when people, when they would do wars and people, the captains would sit down, have a drink. This is how we're going to fight this war. We're going to march in a line and do that. And then
I think Davey's having some issues. Again, that's it's a problem sometimes here with this. But we're going to let, as soon as Davey gets this, we're going to wrap things up on what she's doing. And then we want to get to questions. I know, Amin, you had a question for her and Crystal as well. And I want you guys to feel free to jump in if you want to ask your questions, or I've got them right here that we can just have her do that. Or if you have any comments on the subject. This, again, it's one of those things that, we don't talk about enough. I think especially as Americans. And I agree with Crystal. Amin, I'd love to. I think I saw, Amin, that you are in Amsterdam, and that'd be an interesting vantage from there. He said, I wish I could. All right, Davey, we were just talking that I know you're going to kind of be wrapping up things on that, and then we can get to some of their questions.
Right.
So
I just wanted to end with kind of the scope of what is going on. You can see that Israel itself has many kind of fires to be putting out and monitoring. The Israeli army, have you ever heard this? Isn't anybody in the chat room heard of, if you met an Israeli, you've met the Israeli army. They actually have one of those, now it's an unwritten rule. It used to be that everybody would go in, everyone is expected to serve in the Israeli army. At some countries, I remember Germany had that policy. I don't know, I think it's more flexible as well. But it's like an unwritten rule now. So it's even being applied to when you sit down for a job interview, they ask you when you served in the army. So here's another thing. Christians and Arabs aren't required to serve in the army. So now you can see some of the kind of disenfranchised of people in order to get a job, they ask you when you serve in the army and you tell them you have not. And it's kind of taboo for you not to have served in the army. But understanding kind of the scope of who the army might fight against, would a Palestinian join an Israeli army when at some point they might have to fight their cousin in another neighborhood? So they're kind of, it gets more complex. So that's why I wanted to establish the layers of how the complexity is. And I walked away basically is there a right or wrong answer? Not really, but how do we heal? And there are some programs that are being in place with kind of like the mixed neighborhoods and what they would call integrated schools. But it's very slow going. And I joked, I was like, it's going to be years before that this trip was fabulous. I came home and said this was the best trip I've ever taken, mostly because of my background. I like to mix adventure with culture issues. But people, for the most part, if you went there, I would encourage you to go there. I felt safe at all times. I went to both borders. And
I was going to say that would be some of the biggest misconceptions of people who've never been there, or just the thought of going there is, when you originally say that, it'd be like, whoa, is that safe?
It's I was walking around saying, if I lived in, our friend is from Amsterdam, I would be afraid to go to Chicago. Right? There's places.
There's some days I'm afraid to go to Chicago. Well, no, absolutely.
Right? Like if you look at if you're looking at headlines, we're looking at headlines from over there. If you look at the headline, remember last year Chicago had more deaths, more murders, more than the entire Iraqi war. So if you look at some of the headlines from a global perspective, then you can kind of get perspective. But what I saw was people living their lives. Israel is one of the most innovative places in the world. If you went to Tel Aviv, it's so happening. It's actually the gay capital of that area. Yes.
Okay, see, that blows my mind.
Yeah, like you go to Tel Aviv, you can walk around naked in Tel Aviv and be all right. I'm telling you, and they have all the technology, like it's a technological hub. Inventions are made. So when we see things in the media, and that's why I'm glad we did this, is that we got to understand perspective. Think about if you live somewhere else and you thought of headlines in the U.S., would you be afraid to go to Chicago? I would be afraid to go to the Gaza Strip, and I'd be afraid to go to Chicago. So, yeah, I'd love to get into this. We had some good engagement. So, Lori, go ahead and toss it up.
Well,
you kind of been
I'm
monitoring.
I'm going to go ahead, and I think we talked a little about this, but I'm just going to kind of segue into this. What was your biggest misconception going into this that you said, wow? I mean, I know you laid down a lot of the history. What was your biggest misconception?
Because my background, it's hard to say my misconception. It was more of ignorance. So
Okay.
Jerusalem was incredibly eye-opening from a historical perspective. So if you do like want to engage with Puzzle Israel, they gave us the most secular, engaging tour of Jerusalem that included the stories in the Bible, but we weren't having church. We were going through kind of like, here's this landmark, and this is what, according to the Bible or history, how these two worlds merge. So I found Jerusalem an incredibly exciting day, just walking. We went to the Wailing Wall. We went to the city of David. We walked Hezekiah's cave. And that, yes, it was awesome, Crystal. It was awesome. Can I answer Amin's
Yes,
question?
please. So Amina asked, what sparked your interest to visit Israel and Palestine and see what's really happening?
So it was an opportunity to take a trip with the tour group Puzzle Israel. What I do, like I established at the beginning, is that my background is, I have a degree in world religions. I studied all the religions of the world. And it was from a perspective of mixing anthropology, history, sociology, and kind of seeing the way people think. It will help us understand the way that they act. And what I currently do is I cover travel, culture, adventure, and I mix all of these together. So you can see that this was a great opportunity to kind of sit down with people. They sat down with Israelis, Arabs, soldiers, everybody, the gamut of it, and then also rappelled down a cliff and took hiking adventures. But then I got to go to the border wall, so that kind of invigorated the journalist in me, like, oh, let's go. And I was trying to peek for Al Qaeda. I wanted to see what they look like, as well. Hearing the bombs just on the other side was incredibly invasive. I think somebody asked, did I see that missile, right?
I'm gonna actually let Crystal in here real quick, and I think that Crystal was asking if you got to see. Let me go back to her question earlier. Did you see the Iron Dome in action? Crystal, are you on with us?
Yeah. I'm at work, so I can you all hear me?
Yeah, I love it. I'm at work.
I leave this up all the time at work, but I normally don't call in during the day. But I wanted to talk about this because I am curious about the Iron Dome. I was so interested in it, like about 2.5 years ago, I downloaded the Red App Alert. Red Alert. And I've met a few Israelis from that app, just talking to them. There's like a little chat area. If you've ever seen the app, it'll alert them that there's a bomb coming. And it alerts them by location. So I have that app on my phone because I communicate with them, and I've heard it go off. I mean, literally in the middle of the night, It's terrible. Yeah. It's terrifying.
I saw on the Gaza border, so I went into this beautiful community. If you saw the community, wait till, it won't be till next year, but maybe I can show some pictures earlier because I shot it for my show called Beyond the Usual, which is to be released. But I saw a destroyed Iron Dome in the neighborhood of right next to the Gaza border. So I met this wonderful woman. The community is like any suburban neighborhood that you would see. Beautiful houses. If you saw her house, you would think she was like in the suburbs of like LA or something. It was beautiful. And she was an artist. And to heal, they all have PTSD. They all do. Because there were random attacks on their neighborhood. They don't leave because that was the first question. Why don't you move? It looks like you have money. You have this nice house, right? They don't leave. They said this is their home. This is their community. which I don't know if I understand, but that was their answer. To heal, she does art in ceramics, and we did this beautiful project. You can see on my Instagram, I'm hugging her in front of the wall. On the other side of the wall, where the community over the other side of the wall of Gaza they can see the wall. She started doing art on the wall, kind of to show, like, people to people, I can send you this love. And she decorated one of the iron domes that kind of was in her backyard, and it's like, I think people in her yard, in her yard, and she put little flowers. But it's not that frequent on the Gaza border where you would see that mostly in action. They are just waiting for new tunnels to be built. They don't know where they are. They blocked up the ones that they attacked before, but that's the only way that Hamas can get through is underground. And they just know that they're building them. So
that's amazing.
Hey,
if
they anybody,
did tell me, oh, sorry, really quick.
No,
they
that's
do
okay.
tell me that they all have bomb shelters within their homes.
Every single house has a bomb shelter, and the bus stops, which is it's crazy to see, surreal to see. The bus stops are bomb shelters as well.
That blows my mind. And if anybody's wondering what Crystal is referring to, you can actually find it in iTunes. It's the Red Alert Israel app. And basically what Crystal is describing is that this app goes off. Let's see, their description for the app is Red Alert provides real-time alerts every time a terrorist fires rockets, mortars, or missiles into the state of Israel. And I'm going to download that, Crystal. That's really, I think that's kind of one of those, I'm sure it's very leveling to, it's one thing to talk about this. It's another thing to hear in real time when, another country and people are dealing with it and it brings
it to life for you. That's why I got it.
Yeah,
I heard about on the news or something. And I got it about 2.5
really
years ago. Yeah, and there's
I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, there's not only Israelis on it, but it is mainly Israelis. They kind of argue back and forth, but overall, it seems like it's not the people that argue so much, believe it or not. Even in the app, a lot of them don't like Netanyahu, which shocked me. A lot of them feel like he's got wrong intentions because they do want peace, and I think some of them feel like he's not bringing them peace. So I was kind of shocked by that too, because I always thought they loved Netanyahu and they think he's their big protector. And it's funny, hearing from the real people. So
I asked about that, and the consensus is it's kind of split down the middle. The people who do like Netanyahu, they like that he's very decisive on what he believes, but he is more on the conservative side. So that's why the liberal people, the people that might be engaging with you on that app, they wouldn't like him because he's the one that granted the conservatives to live in the Palestinian neighborhoods, which eventually caused tension. Lola, none of us, to answer your question, none of us have been in the military. So yeah, there's that. But I do. Go ahead.
I am intrigued to see, Lola, you are in the military. It'd be interesting to hear from you on this, because I'm sure that adds a completely different perspective and how you view some of this.
Somebody sent that link. Amin, you sent that link. I have no explanation for that chart. The chart he sent was showing the vast difference in how many Palestinians were killed versus Israelis, and I guess it has to do with kind of like what I established earlier, the disenfranchisement of people, and that's the reason why it's Nakba for Palestinians, the disaster, and Israelis that it kind of occupied the land by the hundreds of thousands came in. They have been advantaged for numbers. That's the only way I can explain the discrepancy in numbers. And of course, now Israel is recognized by the UN as the official state. Yeah, there was something else I was going to explain that I learned, but it has fleed my mind. Does anybody else have any questions? This has been a great kind of conversation for understanding.
I love this. And Crystal, thanks for hopping in and talking with us. We appreciate that.
Okay, we have Paul, I think, or Daniel. Okay, we'll see.
Might be a bit too bad. I'm not sure. Can you hear me?
Hey, Daniel.
Hey. Yes, we can. Are you on the airplane?
No, it's It's a train.
Oh,
But,
I thought the same thing too. I thought, oh my gosh, she's in an airplane.
I'm going to be going to Israel tomorrow. So if you could talk about a few good places to visit, that would be pretty cool.
Okay, so are you going to Tel Aviv?
Yeah.
Or okay. So Tel Aviv is kind of like the happening place. But if you're going, what are you going for? To experience adventure, culture? What are you trying to do? Because Tel Aviv I found not as exciting for me because I really enjoyed the adventure and the cultural immersion. Tel Aviv seemed like any town, any metropolitan town. The beach is awesome. The beach is awesome, and surfers go there. But what do you think?
Well, 4 days is innovation. The other 6 days is culture.
Okay, so innovation, you'll be in Tel Aviv, I presume.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can go, I would say hit Jerusalem if you've never been, and take a, if you want, I can send you my guide. He was great. He is so a lot of, let me tell you about for the industry there. To have a good living is that you work in the military, you work for a government, or you work as a tour guide. Most of the tour guides are academics. So your tour guide is either studying to be a professor or a professor. So you're going to get an awesome kind of secular history of it, which is great because you're going to get the stuff that is familiar, like, oh, Paul stood or David stood here or whatever, but it comes from like a history. You learn about the layers of the city. So the best cultural immersion is there. My guy is Omar Shadadi. I can send him to you. I'll tweet you. I'll tweet you, and he's great.
Yeah, you have to tweet me how I get in contact with him.
Yes. If you could go out further, then if you can go into the Negev, which is the desert, and this is a perfect time of year to go into the desert. And there's everything to do from and also what else is in the desert? We went bike riding through the through the desert, so it's a perfect time of year of that, and that you'll have time to do that within 4 days as well. So I'll definitely send you that after this.
And Daniel, you're making me want a soda so bad. I've cut back, and I want a soda so bad right now. Okay.
Well, where?
Maybe, yeah, I appreciate that. Appreciate the inside knowledge.
Where are you?
Yeah, if you send some messages,
Where are you?
I'm going to be flying over with a group of 10 other people, so I'll use this information.
Yeah, where are you now?
In Denmark.
Yeah,
Can you
Denmark. Oh, okay.
Denmark.
Well, yeah, I think you'll have a blast, and we would like to hear your feedback too once you get there. I think you'll feel perfectly fine. Like I said, the people are living, they're working, I don't think there's any other threat. I didn't feel any more. Like I said, there have been places in the South. I told people I've been places in the South, being a Black woman, that I felt more afraid than being on the border where there was Al Qaeda on the other side. So, yeah.
Daniel, Crystal's asking.
I've been listening.
Crystal's asking you, how far is it from you, like time wise, traveling from Denmark to Israel?
The time difference is 1 hour, and it takes like 4 or 5 hours, I think, to fly.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think you'll have a blast.
I appreciate that knowledge.
Daniel.
All right,
Daniel.
I'm gonna go. Thanks.
Right. Eat the bread. Eat the focaccia. I love it. I miss it already.
All right.
Thanks for hopping on, Daniel. Have a safe trip.
There was one more comparison that I had between something, I think, when Crystal was talking, and it left my mind, but I'm glad we were able to have such engagement for this. The curiosity's there, and if it comes enough that there's enough demand, I guess we can revisit it, right, Lori?
Absolutely. This is kind of, again, we try not to do the fluff, and I think, do you have time for a few more minutes?
Yep.
Davey, all right, let's get Crystal back in here.
Just one question. I just had this, and I don't even know if you have an answer.
From work.
I'm very illiterate on this issue. I'm super illiterate, so this is going to sound stupid, but if they ever did find a solution, where do they expect the Israeli people to go? If they did leave, which I probably would never see that happen, I don't know, but if they did, where do they exactly expect them to go?
Yeah, I don't know what the Palestinian side would be for that, but I don't think they are going to leave. And like I said at the very beginning of this broadcast, that they at one point tried to make the international community try to make a Palestinian and Israeli state, but that has failed. But the West Bank and the Gaza are supposed to both be temporary situations, which seem to be permanent situations. So I can't answer what they expect. You know, what the Palestinians want from, they want them to leave. But it might be similar to, I don't know. I can't really fathom what we would have to have somebody on give that perspective, because that would be the hole that I did not get to.
That would be an interesting perspective. And just to kind of balance this out, Amin is asking, well, where do they expect the Palestinians to go? Because, there are two sides to everything. As the Israelis have come in, and like you said, that when was it established again? 1948.
1948.
Yeah, so people lived there.
But that question that Amin has is probably the stronger one of when that happened. Where do you want us to, like, you just squeezed us out, right? Like, when I tell you, and you can imagine the Holocaust, the millions of people who died. So hundreds of thousands of Jewish people from around the world came to what they call their homeland given by God. So they flooded the place. They outnumbered the place. The Arabs that were living there, some of them were Bedouins who were kind of nomads. They thought, and think about nomads are people that in other societies are called gypsies, people that people don't understand. So then they outcast a certain amount of people. They make them try to, if you are a person who, and I got to visit a Bedouin community. They're no longer, the one I visited was no longer nomadic, but they still lived off the land. So you're a nomad. You know how to live in the desert. You know how to feed yourself and eat from the land, and you have your animals with you. You are rich in your own eyes. If the community forces you to change the way of your people, to kind of go to school and embed, like the Bedouin community is not recognized by the government. So they don't have to pay taxes, but they kind of change their lifestyle. If they want to assimilate, then they make them do things that aren't a part of their nature to do historically. And so then they become poor or on drugs. Kind of like if you think about Native Americans, the problems that they had, they lived off the land as well. But then we put them in this little box. And so they can't live off the land like they normally.
Right. Believe it or not, I'm Native American, and they treat us really well. I mean, they pay for our schools and everything. I think that's why I'm so interested in this. I've always, tried to see it from both sides, though I don't understand it at all. But I don't know, just interesting. I'm glad that you brought this up today.
Yeah, I'm glad that we got to discuss it. But I think this is part, and Lori said this when I went offline, but this is what we tried to do with understanding travel. I think the way that people travel, what we've been calling like our beautiful guest last week, the colonialistic way of popping into a country and seeing how it serves me, is antiquated. That's not how we need to experience travel. Because one thing that I know from traveling, and Lori knows this too, that once you travel, it's hard to be racist because you see people are people. You see a mother wants to do the same thing for her child everywhere in the world.
Right. There's a guy on here. He's from Iraq. Blab kind of brings you to kind of an international field too.
Isn't it great? It makes our world global. I mean, it brings it so easy. It's hard to be as closed-minded and ignorant when you can access the world.
Yeah, there's actually a guy on Blab. He's a great kid. He's a kid to me. He's like 17, 18 years old, and he was telling me that one of his other friends literally had ISIS. He's on his third house. They've taken 3 of his homes. And
wow,
his story is amazing. I haven't seen him online in a while, so I'm hoping he's okay. But just hearing those things, I mean, this is a normal kid going to school, and he's literally living with the friend because they've taken every house. And he's not joining ISIS. He's made it clear, I'm not joining these guys. And that's what they're trying to do, is get him to join, take all their stuff, make them miserable so they'll join them. But
Hey,
I don't know.
what's
It's
up,
really
y'all?
interesting now.
We talking Israel, Palestine?
We are,
Yes.
Michael. How are you today?
I'm good.
Michael, where are you
How are
from?
you?
Good.
I'm from Indiana.
From Indiana.
Okay.
Yep. God bless Jesus, he's a good guy.
So what do you have
But,
to add on this subject? Do you have a question or a comment for
Well,
us?
I want to talk about people saying that it's apartheid,
Yes, that came up. Go ahead.
So I think that it's not really apartheid. It's more of a state of war between two peoples. Israelis would be fine without there's almost 2 million citizens in Israel, right? Can you hear me?
Davey, do you know kind of what the population is, Davey? Uh-oh. I think Davey may have chimed out on us. She'll be back in a minute. Go ahead with your thoughts, Michael.
So there's about 2 million Arab citizens in Israel, maybe more like 1.6 million to be exact. But they have equal rights. They vote. They go to school. They do what they want to do. Amin is brilliant on this. Too bad he can't join.
Yeah, we've got Amin is in here also, but and he would be great to join us, but unfortunately,
Is he the one from Iran?
He, I think Amin,
or from the Netherlands.
He's from Amsterdam, and
Right,
but he said he couldn't join in right now because he's in a room with 2 other people, and he said he spoke to you earlier. So
he did, yeah. We spoke earlier. He's a good guy. And can you hear me, Davey?
Yeah, I'm back.
Davey's
Sorry.
back on with us. Go ahead, hon.
My cousin. Damn, that sucks, man. Just get him some water or something, but or some bud or something. But what I was saying was,
Amin and Michael have a side story going here.
I know.
Yeah.
So what's going on?
So, I don't think it's apartheid because, like I said, the Arab citizens of Israel are not. There is no statewide policy of pushing them to a lower caste or anything. There is, like Dr. Approved is saying, it's complicated. There is obviously racism on the ground. I will say that there's racism against Arabs in Israel, but it's not a state policy of oppressing the Arab citizens in Israel. But if we look at the Arabs in the West Bank or Gaza, their rights are obviously not up to par with Israeli citizens, right? They're occupied. They can't vote. They can't move freely. All that stuff. But I still don't think that's apartheid because they are not citizens. I think that's war.
So it's not on the books, but it is. There are systemic things that are in place. For example, the example that I used, I don't think you were on yet, but
I don't think I was.
When you apply for a job, one of the first questions they ask you,
where did you serve?
When did you serve? And if
where and when?
If you're Arab, you're not, so you're not going to likely get the job. So those little subtle.
Well, okay, so
yeah.
Arabs are allowed to serve.
Right.
They are legally exempt from serving because, for obvious reasons, right? Because they don't want to serve in the IDF. So
but also, if I'm an Arab, if I'm a Palestinian and I serve, and let's say I'm a Palestinian living in Jerusalem and I serve, and we have internal combat, I might have to kill my cousin in the West Bank or in the Gaza. Like, that's the conflict of why many of them don't serve.
Okay, that's if your cousin in the West Bank or Gaza is probably throwing rocks or doing something illegal. You're not just going to go kill them. It's the same thing for Israelis, for Jews serving in the IDF. If their cousin is doing something illegal to the army, they're obviously going to get the retribution of that. That you can't just go and attack soldiers and not expect to be
No,
shot. You know,
that's true. But what I'm saying is that's why they may not serve.
Right, and that's why they're legally exempt from serving.
Right.
Because
but then the systemic thing is that now that's a question that I'm going to be asked to get a job. I'm not going to get the job because those subtle systemic things which we see here in the U.S. That aren't on the books. There is that came up, the apartheid thing.
So that's a result of policies, but those policies are not meant to bring down Arabs. Those policies are meant to, if anything, integrate Arabs, right? I think.
Right. No, and that's what we talked about earlier, is that there are people that are trying to remove the segregation. We are where we are now. There isn't going to, Israelis aren't Jewish.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I think you cut off, or maybe I lost signal.
I think she cut off there. It's okay. And Jim's asking, what are the solutions to stop the persecution? And Dr. Approved has chimed in. And again, Jim or Dr. Approved, feel free to jump in on the conversation here. Dr. Approved said, wait a second, people forced to live in desperation, acting in despair and being judged for
people aren't going to leave it.
It isn't a desire to integrate.
What is he trying?
Arabs.
What?
Let's see.
I'm not sure if I understand what he's trying to say.
Dr. Approved, if you want, feel free to jump in with us. And Amin is saying that Dr. Approved is an Israeli and well-versed on this issue as well. So again, we'd love to have you jump in on the conversation. And Davey's trying to jump back in here. She's having some technical difficulty.
Yo, Dr. Approved, why are you telling me to listen to myself? Or is that I'm American that lived? I can't read all his comments.
He's saying that he's an American that lived there.
Okay, well, I was born there. I grew up there. I live in America now, so.
So you lived there?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, again, I think a lot of people here, Dr. Approved, if you are willing to jump in, that would be a great conversation here for us. So, and if we don't have anybody else jumping in, we may wrap things up here in a little bit. So again, but we'd love to have this go on as long as there's a good conversation for it. And Davey's back with us.
I just wanted to add one thing. I remembered what I forgot earlier, is that I asked Israelis what American administration did they think was the most effective. You know how, Lori, we usually play games, and
yes.
Michael and who lived there, Dr. Approved and Amin. So I'm going to let you guess, and then I'll tell you. So, Lori, who do you think? What administration do you think Israelis as a whole think were the most effective?
As far as American administration?
For the Middle East.
For the cause for the Middle East.
So Crystal says Bush.
Crystal says Bush.
I'm going to say the Clinton administration.
No, that's okay. No, you're going to go Clinton. I'll be rogue and go Reagan then.
And Crystal, you said Bush, Walker Bush? W?
Yeah, which Bush? And Amin is asking for a little more effective in what? How? In what way?
Yes, she says young Bush.
Young Bush.
More effective or with their cause in mind to the Middle East. So I will answer. Crystal is right. They think Walker was most effective. They think that his attack on Iraq was misplaced, but at least he did something. And then I asked, what do they think about President Obama? And remember, President Obama's policy was to leave the Middle East, and he did that. And so they feel abandoned by him, even though they knew up front he was leaving. They feel abandoned by the U.S. because of Obama. Yeah, they do not like Obama.
So I'm intrigued to kind of follow this up more current. I know we said we weren't going to do politics, but in a way, especially Amin and some of the others here, who do you view would be the best candidate upcoming in our next election for the Israeli cause? And have you actually been able to see what some of their platforms have been in the way that a lot of our media has been portrayed lately? I think we've had a lot of catfighting and not as much platforming. So,
yeah. Michael.
I know, for example, Israelis would want either Marco Rubio or probably Marco Rubio is the best for Israelis. Clinton wouldn't be bad, I don't think. I think she would keep the status quo. I think Trump's a wild card, you know, like he could do something crazy either way.
I did ask a handful about Trump. Of course, you can't go anywhere without them asking me. I told you, been everywhere. It was in Norway. It was everywhere. Quebec. They were asking me about him.
Trump,
but they don't. They think he's more dangerous than he would be effective, even though he says he will support Israel, go back in and be more effective. They think he's more dangerous.
And Amin is chiming in saying, not taking in mind his other positions, that he thinks Bernie Sanders is an overall peaceful and empathetic person. And I do agree in that, but that's not taking in mind his other positions too.
Yeah. So also
Bernie doesn't seem to even have a clear foreign policy.
The foreign policy. The thing. Now, just taking the question at hand for Israel, who the most effective politician would be, I think they would be more on the conservative side, and might be somebody like Rubio, because I think if we go Democratic, they're going to uphold Obama's policy for retreating out of the Middle East. And I see
Crystal Roses made a good point too.
Yeah, Crystal said that she thinks Israelis would view Bernie as weak. They seem to like strong, firm personalities. And I
even though he's their fellow Jew, he would be their fellow Jew.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I think that would also present problems, you know, because people would say, "Oh, he's Jewish. Like, of course he's going to support Israel." So maybe he would have to, like, you know, to counter that, he would have to. I don't know.
I don't want to imagine that, Plasberkey. I don't want to imagine that. He said, "Imagine Trump talking to the Muslims." He's already talking to them, and he's not saying he's not saying very clear things about. He's doing a sweeping statement on Muslims and not the terrorist. So
Crystal's chiming in and saying that Trump would carpet bomb the entire region and justify it.
Right. Maybe, perhaps that's what makes him dangerous. But I have
Trump's.
I love this conversation. Hi everyone. Hi Nicola. What does he say? As much Trump concerns me, Cruz is the snake that everyone needs to worry about. So now we're in full-on politics, Lori.
We're into politics. But as much as we don't want to talk politics, it is so, you know, it's so tied into this. And it's honestly, it's the only way that I think Crystal was saying that as Americans, we're very sheltered. But again, it is one way for us to be able to, I guess, tie into the subject well and understand its implications globally.
Definitely.
And it's an interesting point. Chad said you don't want to talk politics, but you want to discuss Palestine versus Israel, and that is a vantage on that. Although Davey tried to lay a lot of the groundwork okay, hey, Michael, when you're done peeing, come back. Thanks.
Yeah, that was weird.
Okay.
So thank you for catching that. So what we was it, Chad? What we established earlier was that we weren't going into a political discussion. We were discussing and raising all the issues which most Americans aren't aware of, both sides of the political topics over there in Israel, and kind of laying what one side thinks and what the other side thinks, and kind of we did a lot of history to lay that a lot of history talk about what went on from 1948 until now. So you can replay that, and then we'll get all the details of that. We'll take one more caller, and then we will wrap up. So let's see.
We
lost them.
There we go. We got one more here. Is you know what, Michael? Let's let someone else come in here. If anybody else wants to call in, I think we had 2 other people who kind of got knocked off there.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. And this is King Chad.
So, Chad, we have this policy as you are chiming in. State your name, where you're from, and then kind of present your comment or question in a 10-second. Okay. Chad, are you there?
Yeah.
Chad? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that what you really look like, Chad?
So, welcome to our discussion. The nice abs, Crystal says.
Not me. But, I'm in my profile picture, but yeah, I'm on the Palestine side.
So go ahead and give us what kind of your comment or question.
Chad, where are you from? Where do you live right now?
Try and guess.
Okay, I'll guess. You're a Palestinian living in Israel.
No.
Oh, well then, how would I guess? There's a whole world out there.
Yeah, from Ireland.
Okay, I thought I heard that, but you weren't you were kind of saying very short, comments there. I'm like, wait, I think I hear, but I didn't want to sound too ignorant there.
Oh, Clash Berkey. He said he was close. He said Scotland. Scotland. That's what he said. Okay, what do you want to add to this conversation, Chad?
Just you Americans, you 2 Americans are.
We are.
Yes.
Yeah, you're both like donating to Israel for no reason, and I think you're like terrorists, pretty much. Well, in regards, like, I mean, if you look at it from the Palestinian perspective, you're like pretty much terrorists because you give money to them for no reason, like military aid. So yeah, I think that's it.
So you view because American politics support that in essence it's terrorism.
Yes.
Okay.
Because right. So Palestinians were there first, and they own that land, not Americans or not British people. So yeah, it's pretty much terrorism.
Yep, and that's one of the point of views. That's one of the point of views we kind of discussed.
We've talked about, yes.
Yeah.
Chad, have you been with us? I was going to say, if you'd been with us most of the conversation, Davey comes from a journalistic background, and so Davey's done a real good job of trying to present both sides of the situation, and neither one of us are chiming in, supporting one side or the other per se. This is just, a conversation we want to have as a whole with everybody because we think it should.
Yeah.
Right. And like what you said, there is something to, like, Americans they are very pro-Israel, and that's why I wanted to present this. There's not a lot of balanced coverage in our media up to what's going on over there. So that's why I wanted to have this discussion as an American going over there. And I sat with Palestinians. I went to a Palestinian neighborhood, ate with Arabs, a couple of them, maybe three different homes I ate with, and talked to Israelis there, talked to right-wing Israelis, talked to left-wings who are kind of like, let's blend the neighborhoods and stop the segregation, and also talked to Arabs who are living there as well. Of course, I couldn't get to the Gaza Strip or to the West Bank, but I got enough perspective. I talked to some history, a lot of academics who kind of gave me information on the dialogue there. So it's hard to and how we established and started off the conversation starting from 1948 and the Israeli Independence Day and the Palestinian Nakba, which means do you know what that means, Chad?
Yeah, it's Freedom Day.
For Nakba, for the Palestinian, means disaster. So that's when they kind of lost the battle, the war of 1948. So I will actually have to go. I think Lori has to go as well. This was a great discussion. And like you guys, if there's popular demand, we can continue this. We do our TravelScope every week. but we can continue this online if you'd like. And again, I'm Davy Sutton. She's Lori Mac Brown. Our Twitter handles are there.
Feel free to tweet us if you guys have any particular things you do want to talk about. It's something we can put on the docket and stuff too. We like to present travel and in a way that kind of brings the world and some of the subjects together. And we'll keep back at it every week.
All right. Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Thanks so much for the great conversation, guys.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.